Welcome to Decision Analyst Insider Series webinar on pricing analytics. Are you leaving money on the table? My name is Christy Allen. I am the Marketing Director at Decision Analyst and the moderator today. Before I introduce our presenters, I have a few notes for everyone. There is a copy of today's presentation in the handout section available for everyone to download, along with some relevant white papers and case studies. Also, please feel free to ask questions by typing in the chat box. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer your question during the webinar, someone will respond to your question within a day or two. Today's presenters are John Coleus, Senior Vice President of Advanced Analytics. John has approximately 30 years of experience applying advanced metrics and models using data of many kinds. And Elizabeth Horn, Senior Vice President of Advanced Analytics, who is co-presenting. She specializes in product and price optimization and marketing segmentation. And with that, I will hand the presentation over to John.
Okay, thank you. Today we're going to talk about pricing analytics, and we will cover typical business objectives when that pricing analytics supports, some methodology that is used in the pricing analytics along together with pros and cons of the different methods, and we'll give some examples as well as we go through the presentation today. So first of all, pricing analytics is supporting many different business objectives, and we've listed 5 of the most common here. To begin with, a most common, probably, business objective is to optimize or maximize revenue, profit, or market share. And we basically try to measure the price response and use that information in order to determine what is an optimal or a revenue or profit maximizing price point. In some cases, we might, for a new product, for example, want to establish market share as a first entrant in the market and might also want to optimize or maximize market share. A second common objective for pricing analytics is to optimize product line pricing based upon customers' perceived value. And this is the idea of using pricing analytics to determine which features or which products in a product line are more upper tier products where customers are willing to pay more, and which ones are a little bit lower tier products customers are not as willing to pay as much. And what is the relative price between these more upper or higher priced products in the product line and the lower priced products, and where is that optimal price difference? So that's the product line pricing based upon customers' perceived value. And a third objective is to customize price based upon who, or actually a customer segment. Who is the customer? And this is really a price discrimination strategy that has to be approached with caution. But in some cases, with service or experience-based products, that it can also be a pricing objective that a firm could use in the actual marketplace. A fourth pricing objective is to price based upon purchase channel. So this is a very old method. It's, for example, if there is a organic or natural food product sold in, for example, a Walmart, it's probably priced differently than it would be in a specialty natural foods grocery store. And a fifth objective revolves around new products. And typically with a new product, many times there's not a benchmark for what price to charge. And it's very important to enter the market with exactly the best price point for the new product. And there's special research methods that are used to address this type of issue in pricing analytics. So before we go further, let's talk about what we're truly trying to measure with pricing analytics, and that is the price elasticity. And this is an example here of a demand curve on the left side where the price elasticity, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is minus 1.0, which implies that a price drop of 10% from 200 to 180 causes a 10% increase from 100 to 110 in units of demand. A higher in absolute value price elasticity in the right graph of minus 1.5 shows that a same price drop of 10% from 200 to 180 causes a 15% increase, or 100 to 115 in unit demand. So measuring this kind of price elasticity is really measuring the response that customers have to price. And this is the foundation of all of the pricing analytics work that we do to support the various objectives that we talked about. So now we're going to talk a little bit about pricing analytics, different methods that are used in pricing analytics. And the first method we'd like to discuss is econometric demand modeling. This is an older technique, still heavily used today, of course, but it requires historical data on unit sales and prices. And essentially, it's estimating a line that best fits data on the historical unit sales and prices in order to measure that price elasticity that we were talking about a moment ago. It requires that there is enough historical data, long enough time series of it. It requires that there are good data for this type of analysis to work. And it also requires that the data is not just available for just price, but is also available for other factors that impact demand, so that the price effect can be isolated separately and uniquely from those other factors like market size, macroeconomic conditions, and competitor prices that also impact demand. So one of the advantages of this approach is that it uses sophisticated econometric modeling methods that are really well grounded in economic theory, in econometric theory, and in statistics. And so this well-grounding, this well-developed discipline results in unbiased estimates of price elasticity, and it's based upon actual in-market data. So there's a lot of face validity and to this kind of analysis. The disadvantages, however, are there, and particularly the price variation in the actual market may not be that great. It may not be sufficient to reliably measure the price effects. And in addition, there could be price points in the analytics for pricing that we need to investigate that are not present in the historical data. So we can't deliver price elasticity measurement for price points outside the range of the historical data. And then, as we see today with rapidly changing markets, for example, e-commerce coming in and disrupting the brick and mortar retail business, we see that older data, perhaps older than 5 years old, and maybe even younger data than that, might not be really relevant to today's marketplace, where consumer behaviors are changing so rapidly. A second type of analytical approach or methodology for measuring price elasticity is to use choice modeling. And we're going to refer to this as stated preference choice modeling. For all of you who are in the audience who have done conjoint or choice-based conjoint or choice modeling with survey data, this is what we're talking about. And basically, the respondent is given a task in a survey where a product is present, and not just the product that we're investigating and measuring the price elasticity for, but a full competitive set around that product. And the respondent states, and that's where the word stated preference comes from, states how many, if any, of each product would be purchased. It could include a lot of variety in the menu task itself, with bundled choices available and so forth. This type of task is very common in market research and is really a bread and butter of a lot of what we do in marketing research today. It has some great advantages. It includes competitive and context effects, because the entire competitive set is shown in a choice screen, or all of the major competitive factors are shown in the choice screen. So they're taken into account when the survey respondent makes decisions and states what they would buy. It can deliver brand-specific price and feature effects, because we actually control what prices we're varying by brand, so that we can actually measure price elasticity in much more granular detail than we can with other methods. And we can evaluate not just a product, but an entire product line. And as I mentioned before, packages and bundles as well. It can deliver using more sophisticated modeling techniques such as hierarchical Bayes choice modeling or latent class choice modeling, segment level or even individual customer level price effects. And we can include new products in these types of stated choice modeling, choice tasks and surveys, products that are not even in the market today. So you can see it has that advantage over econometric demand modeling, where the new products are just simply not in the data. It does have some disadvantages. This approach, where the respondent focuses on a particular task, without all the distractions that happen in the real world in an actual purchase decision, it's typical for the respondent to overstate the impact of price. But with survey choice modeling, if we design it really well, it can mitigate some of this effect, this overstatement. So, for example, if we remind the respondent about what their purchase constraints are, then they will, like in the real world, make choices as if there are trade-offs, and they're trading off benefits and prices in order to make their choices, much like they would in the real world. So we're simulating realism by that. So by injecting as much realism as we can in the stated preference choice task, we can get more accurate price elasticities. However, as a general rule, there is a tendency to overstate the price effect, not as much as with other techniques, but certainly to some extent in stated preference choice modeling. There is a solution to this overstatement, and sometimes it could be understatement as well, that comes from stated preference choice modeling, and that is to use what's called joint stated revealed preference choice modeling. I'll refer to that as JSRP for joint stated revealed preference. And this is exactly the same task in terms of the survey as we saw with the stated preference choice modeling, but we have real-world purchase data that's also included at the modeling step, so that the using the appropriate techniques to adjust and calibrate the model, the actual price elasticity is automatically calibrated into a more realistic level, because we have actual in-market purchase data included in the analysis and the development of the price elasticity and the way it's measured. So the primary advantage of this technique is in reducing the bias in measurement of price elasticity. And of course, getting the right measure of price elasticity is critical when we're doing pricing analytics. It avoids a false positive, because it's more common that stated choice experiments would cause an overstatement of the price effect. Then it's less likely that we're going to have a false positive where we're saying we should reduce price when actually we should increase price, for example. It does require specialized software and an experienced modeler to implement. However, these tools are available, and this technique can be used and has been used. Before we move on, it's worth mentioning a couple of other survey techniques that are commonly or frequently used in pricing analytics, and one is the Gabor-Granger method, which is a case where we select, say, for example, 5 price points, and we randomly select the first price point or select the middle price point, and just simply show a concept or a product to a respondent and ask them directly if they would buy it at this price. And if they say, typically it's a purchase rating scale is used, such as definitely would buy, probably would buy, and so forth. And if the respondent says top 2 box, definitely or probably would buy, then the respondent is shown a higher price point to see if they would buy it at even a higher price point. And if they are not top 2 box, then the respondent is shown a lower price point, and until the lowest price point is reached among the test price points in the survey experiment. So this is the key advantage of this approach, is that it's easy and inexpensive to program the survey and to do the analysis. The disadvantage, though, is that it's a direct questioning approach. It's subject to more response bias than an indirect approach, such as a stated preference choice modeling experiment, where the respondent is indirectly revealing how much they desire a product by having trade-offs between benefits and prices among other products. There's no trade-off, there's no competitive context in this task, and the respondent can kind of game the system if they notice that if they say don't definitely or probably purchase a product, that they will get a lower price point, they might wait for an even lower price point. So it tends to overstate the price effect even more so than stated preference choice modeling. Another technique that's frequently used and is still used, and many firms do this, is what's called the Van Westendorp pricing methodology. And in this methodology, I won't go into the details because many of you will know, and we're working market research about this. There's a 4-question series about whether the respondent would buy, at what price would this product that is shown to the respondent be too cheap, expensive, or too expensive. And the key, and then what's done in this approach is typically a too expensive or too cheap price intersection point of some cumulative lines that are drawn is determined as the optimal price point, with the logic that maximizes the number of people out in the market for which price is not an issue when they're buying the product. The key advantage is that it's inexpensive to program again and to do the analysis. The disadvantage is it's really not based on any kind of economic theory. Again, it's a direct questioning approach, and it's subject to some response bias versus indirect questioning approaches. And it really doesn't replicate anything close to an actual purchase decision process. And the closer we can get to an actual purchase decision process replicating that in a survey environment, the more accurate the results would be. So, as a little bit of a case study in these first 3 methods we mentioned, econometric modeling, stated preference choice modeling, and joint stated revealed preference choice modeling, we took some data and for a product category that is a consumer good category. And this was a fairly loyal category where a lot of respondents are loyal to the product and brand that they buy. And we found with econometric modeling of some data for this product category, a price elasticity of minus 2.1. The price in the market varied somewhat, but we see the standard deviation of that variability of price of 0.14. Which is lower than what we'll see with stated preference and joint stated preference modeling. And why is it lower? Because in these bottom 2 techniques, we're actually injecting some variability of price. We're controlling the price variability because we're using an experimental design to vary price in choice experiments that are done in a survey environment. And with stated preference choice modeling, we found a price elasticity of minus 1.8. When we combine the choice stated responses from the survey with some in-market choice data, we found a price elasticity which is lower in absolute value of minus 0.8. And this is a common result that we find with joint stated revealed preference modeling, where we find that the calibration of the price elasticity is towards a smaller number in absolute value. So this is an example of the kind of differences we see of the different techniques in actual application. So now what we'll do is talk about some examples of pricing analytics. Before we do that, this is a short tutorial on price elasticity, because we've been talking about that a lot. If the price elasticity, according to economic theory, is greater than 1 in absolute value, then that implies that when price increases, as we see in the bottom left here, that revenue would decrease. If it's unit elastic and the price elasticity is exactly 1, then a price increase would cause no change in revenue. And if it's inelastic, that is to say the price elasticity is less than 1 in absolute value, then a price increase would cause a revenue increase. And you can see how this relates to maximizing product or product line revenue, and how we can use price elasticity itself towards that objective. So this first type of objective of maximizing that we talked about earlier, of maximizing revenue, profit, or market share, can be accomplished by stated preference choice modeling or joint stated preference choice modeling. But we can measure the price elasticity for different products in a product line, such as in this graph, product A, B, and C, where A has the highest price elasticity in absolute value, it's elastic, a minus 1.4, B is a minus 1.1, and C has the lowest price elasticity in absolute value. It's in the inelastic range. If we were to optimize revenue, provide using the same price point for all of these three products in a product line, we would find, for example, that the price for the entire product line, the optimal price would be about $3.30 in this example. However, knowing that the price elasticities vary and how much they vary, if we were to allow pricing to vary independently for each of the three products, we would find, as according to the theory, that we would raise price for the product that's inelastic and lower price for the product that are more elastic in order to maximize revenue. And this is an example of using price elasticity that can be measured in pricing analytics to support the objective of maximizing revenue for a product line by varying the prices of the individual products in that product line. The second pricing objective that we talked about earlier was to optimize product line pricing based upon the customer's perceived value, which we're abbreviating as CPV, customer perceived value. And again, this is the kind of experiment where the kind of analysis where we're trying to measure 4 different products, which ones are the customers valuing more than others. The ones that they value more typically have a lower price elasticity. Customer perceived value, CPV, is inversely related to price elasticity, the absolute value of price elasticity. And those that they value less tend to have a higher price elasticity. So by measuring price elasticity, we're actually measuring customers' perceived value. And we can leverage this CPV, or customer's perceived value, by charging a higher price for those products that have a higher perceived value. And to do this, the seller has to be able to differentiate the products based upon features and the benefits of the products themselves and communicate those very well. The goal is to charge more for what the customer values more. So communicating that is very important, and measuring what it is that they're valuing is very important. The communication can be done in packaging, it can be done in advertising, it can be done in marketing programs. But how do we know what to communicate? What is it that the customers are valuing more? And we can use choice modeling to do this. In this example with some power drills, we see we've taken the drills and broken out some features and brand and some features of the drill that have different levels, like it's corded or has a long life battery, it has dual speed or not, and it's lighter or not. And those kinds of things are each features of the product, which in a choice modeling experiment, we can vary individual features, measure the CPV for each individual features, including brand, and then determine the customer perceived value for the product by summing those customer perceived values across the individual features to get a total value for each product. And then, because we can measure the total value for each product, in this manner, we can actually measure how the price elasticity varies, but also why it varies, so that we can communicate the proper things in our marketing programs to demonstrate to consumers those features that they actually do value more, and to enable us to support charging a higher price for a particular product. So that's an example of using choice modeling to support the CPV objective. A third objective we mentioned was customizing price based upon customer segment. And the way pricing analytics can support this is with choice modeling. We can use techniques such as a hierarchical Bayes choice modeling, as we mentioned earlier, to measure individual price elasticities for a representative sample of respondents. And by doing that, we can actually measure a distribution of price elasticity. And this data here, again, was a product category we talked about earlier where we did a case study. And it was a very loyal product category. And we see the large bar on the left with a very low price elasticity represented by the green square here. representing that a large part of the distribution is falling into this low in absolute value price elasticity. And so by knowing who these people are in this bar, we can actually charge more for those people for this product. Now, we have to be very careful about that. Typically, we need to have a reason to charge more because there may be some legal considerations or even regulatory considerations. And so, reasons might be that it costs more to deliver to a certain customer group or customer type, or the competition is greater in certain customer segments, and therefore it justifies differential pricing by type of customer. Once we know this, we can use the pricing analytics can support this by looking at the demographics and the digital footprint and the lifestyle segmentations for the people that have a lower in absolute value price elasticity in order to find them, in order to market to them, and actually implement the customer differential pricing. So a fourth of business objective we mentioned earlier was to customize price based on purchase channel. And for example, a manufacturer might be a manufacturer of a generic brand that is sold in different channels. And by measuring price elasticity by channel, we can support varying price by channel. So we would do this by drawing a representative sample of consumers and do a choice modeling experiment where we have different cells for the different shoppers at different channels. For example, Walmart, Walgreens, Target, and CVS. In this example here, which is hypothetical, we have a particular generic brand with a price elasticity that's in the inelastic range for CVS and in the elastic range for Walgreens and Walmart, which might suggest that we could raise the price, or a manufacturer could suggest to a retailer that they're doing business, that they're offering their products with, to raise the price in a certain retail environment if they know that price elasticity is relatively low. And they can provide the evidence from the survey experiment that the price elasticity in absolute value is relatively low. So that's an example of how we can use pricing analytics to support price variation by purchase channel. So now I'm going to let Beth handle the next topic.
All right, thank you, John. So let's look at an example for another business objective, which is optimizing pricing for a new product. So in this example, we would first design a survey that contains a pre-concept exposure choice task. Now, this choice task does not include the new product. It only includes current products. Next, we would expose survey respondents to the new product concept, and we would obtain their reactions using purchase motivation questions such as purchase intent, value, uniqueness, believability, could be appeal. And as a last phase, we would introduce a post-concept exposure choice task. So this time, the task includes the new product. So here's an example of a pre-concept choice task for a canned beverage category. And as you can see, the task displays what we're calling the current market, current products. Respondents can click on an image to enlarge. They can read about the product. You can even have a description displayed. And the task for the respondent is just how many have you purchased of the ones shown in the past 30 days. Typically, 5 or so tasks would be presented to the respondent for this pre-concept choice task. And then they would go through the product concept or the new product concept and answer the various purchase motivation type questions. We would then show them a post-concept choice task. And again, now the new product is showing up. We ask a similar question as with the pre, thinking of the drinks you'll buy in the next 30 days. So how many of each of these would you buy? Pricing varies. The attributes for the new product can vary across typically 5 screens. So we would pool together or combine the selections made in the pre and post-concept exposure choice tasks and model them to measure price elasticity for the new product. So there will be some overstatement of the new product purchase intent. And we use the purchase motivation questions to calibrate or adjust down the enthusiasm that consumers typically have for new products within a survey setting. We use standard volumetric forecasting methods to estimate the percent trial for that new product. And once we apply that as a calibration to the model, the price elasticity results can be used to find an optimal price for that new product.
Okay, great. Thanks, Beth. So we have essentially talked today about different types of pricing objectives that can be supported by pricing analytics, some of the methodologies and the pros and cons, and given a little bit more detail and some examples about how these methodologies can support the different pricing objectives, and a little bit about the implementation strategy and what's important in implementing a particular pricing objective and how the analytics can support that as well. So now we're ready and open for questions.
Okay, so John, it looks like we have a few questions, and the first one is, what is an example of an industry that could implement different price points for different customer segments?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's not as common a strategy. Some that might come to mind would be maybe a personal trainer. It's more industries that are service or experience-based where the individual is receiving some benefit in a service or experience and experiencing that benefit, and they can perceive some value differences differently than other consumers. So that might be an example. A personal trainer would be an example.
Okay. House cleaner maybe, or
that's another
personal
good one.
Life coach.
That's another good one.
That could also
that's a good one.
could be true. Okay, our next question is, what is really the feasibility or ability of someone to get that in-market data? In other words, I think they're probably talking about, it sounds like a great technique, but how can we get that data for the revealed preference?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that this technique has not been used as much as it should have been used in recent years because it's difficult to get the in-market data and especially the pricing with that in-market data. And it requires a lot of effort. But one of the things that's happened in recent times is that with e-commerce coming in, we have a lot of those prices that are actually online. And even if they're not the same prices as might be in the stores, for example, in brick and mortar in a retail setting, in econometrics and in choice modeling, we have something called an instrumental variable. And so as long as the prices that we get that we might scrape from online, for example, from the web, are correlated with the prices that are in store, for example, then then those prices satisfy the requirement of being an instrumental variable, and we theoretically get an unbiased measurement of price elasticity. But that's a good question. I think we're getting to a marketplace today where we're swimming in data. We have lots of data available. It's going to be easier to get that in-market data to do this type of technique.
Okay. And while you were talking on our first question, we did have an attendee remind us that Uber is trying this differential pricing segment. And I can't believe we forgot about that. So far, I'm not entirely sure how successful it is, but that is an example and they're using real-time data feedback to adjust those prices.
Yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you for that. So the final question that we have is, how large do you think is the bias in price elasticity estimates and choice modeling?
Yeah, it really depends. So we have well-designed choice experience and, then others that might not be so well-designed. I think the closer you get to realism in a choice experiment, where consumers are thinking about particularly their constraints, their budget constraint, the more realistic the price elasticity. However, it is generally true that in a survey setting, the respondent is more focused on the task at hand, the purchase decision, than they might be in the actual purchase in the marketplace. So as a general rule, the way choice models, survey-based choice models are done in market research in general, I'd say as a general rule, there's probably an overstatement. A couple of studies have been done in the past and presented, for example, at the Advanced Research Techniques Forum in the past, where there were, in consumer packaged goods categories, a sort of a 2-to-1 ratio of the amount of overstatement, so that the price response was double in survey-based choice modeling when compared with scanner data, for example. So I think it's true that there is a bias. How much bias kind of depends. The other thing that we might say is that if we have a price category, a product category where prices are people are very sensitive to price, we may be interested primarily in the relative price elasticity. So it might not be as essential that we get the actual level of price elasticity, but the relative price elasticity is what's important.
Okay. Terrific. Well, that's all the questions we have currently. So we will turn the presentation back over to Christy for wrap-up.
Thank you, John and Beth, and thank you everyone for attending today's Insider Series webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to email John and Beth. Our next Insider Series webinar will be Wednesday, September 6th. Decision analysts Jerry Thomas and Clay Detloff will be presenting Ignition Liftoff, Accelerating New Product Development. We hope you enjoyed today's session and are looking forward to seeing you for our next webinar. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.